The Sacramento Kings have no first-round draft pick. The Sacramento Kings also have very little cap space to sign free agents. Not that they've ever really been a free agency destination. So if the Kings and Scott Perry want to make some big changes this summer, or changes at all, it's more than likely going to have to be through the trade market. Will Z from Sports Illustrated joins me as we break down the most tradable assets on the Kings. And could a fan favorite be on the move? It's all right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter at ABC 10 News. And I'm excited for this podcast today because if you're not familiar with Will Z, you need to be. He is a Sacramento-based writer for Sports Illustrated. He writes about the Kings and only the Kings. He is an absolute stats, numbers, and analytics guru. But he dabbled in trade conversations, a lot of articles recently about trade scenarios for the Sacramento Kings. And his most recent article I thought was phenomenal. It ranks essentially the 10 most tradable assets that the Sacramento Kings have on their roster, 1 being the most tradable, 10 being the least tradable out of the group. So I brought Will Z on this podcast for us not just to talk about the rankings of those assets, but why the Kings would consider moving those assets and who they could move those assets for. And as this conversation goes on, you're going to realize that pretty much there's a very, very, very good chance that to avoid just running it back, the Sacramento Kings will have to get rid and trade a fan favorite this offseason. I'm not going to spoil any more than that. Here is my conversation with Will Z. Excited as always to be joined by Sports Illustrated. I know they call it SI, but it's Sports Illustrated. Will Z, you might know him also as his kind of his old life, Will Z Stats. Will Z is phenomenal with the numbers, phenomenal with the Sacramento Kings coverage. Go check out Will Z's work. He'll help you get through this off season. And one of the many great pieces that Will has done is actually what we're going to hyper focus on today. Will recently released an article breaking down essentially or ranking the most tradable assets on the Sacramento Kings. Will, what inspired this article first and foremost? Because I am of the belief that the Sacramento Kings need to make changes, but as I'm sure you're aware of, and you could probably even break it down further than I can break it down, it's going to be incredibly difficult for Scott Perry to make changes based off of the state of this roster financially, the talent of this roster, the log jams at positions, and absolute desert at other positions, like the point guard position. This is just a very strange offseason. So what inspired ranking the pieces or the most tradable assets that the Sacramento Kings have?
Yeah, honestly, probably just I couldn't write any more trade proposals, and then I go and follow it up with trade proposals. But we're at the point of the offseason where finding stuff to write about is hard, and we're throwing out trade ideas, trade proposals, trade rumors, and wanted to kind of take a step back and look at what the Kings really have. And like you said, it's not great. They have a lot of money tied up in 2 positions, the shooting guard and the center position. So based on both talent and money, it's going to be really hard for Perry to come in and make those moves if they want to be contenders next season, which it looks like they do. It's going to be tough. So wanted to kind of take a look at what they have, what their options are. And one of the things that at first glance is difficult for them is their contracts are either really high or on the lower end. They don't have that in-between money. DeRozan probably is the closest that you can get to that. He's at $24.8 million next year, but you don't have anyone else between 20 and 39. So you've got Monk at 18.8, and Levine at 47.5. So it's hard if you want to bring in a high money player, you're going to have to combine salaries, or you have to really go bargain shopping around that like $15 million range if you wanted to look at Valanciunas or Monk. But it's tough just money wise. So taking a look at contracts, the players that they have, and just kind of see where they all rank in my mind.
I mean, I get that you're sick of trade proposals. I'm already feeling that too. And God, we're not even in June yet.
I know.
But there's a reason why we're hyper focusing on trades, right? Because you don't have a draft pick. So you can't really add, I mean, maybe second rounders, or maybe you could potentially move into the first round on draft night if there's a prospect that you're really infatuated with. You don't have much cap space at all for free agency. Plus, Sacramento's never really been a free agency destination. So trades is pretty much the way that at least this summer Scott Perry is going to have to operate. It's going to have to be in the trade market. And like you talk about that, those wide financial margins of contracts mean that the Kings are pretty limited in what they can do and really have to put together these Tetris-like proposals financially and fit these pieces together in these combinations to find the type of players that they want. It's really, really tricky. And when it comes to for you to ranking tradable assets, that's where, like, if you're going to have to find a way to financially put these pieces together and make things work when you're pretty limited, it usually means you have to give up pieces that you're hesitant to give up. So that being said, Will, number one on your most tradable assets list is
Keegan Murray. So it feels like we always come back to Keegan being the untouchable player on the Kings, which who knows if that will be the case going forward with new general manager. But Keegan still, he hits all of the marks for being a coveted trade asset in terms of his contract, his age, his position, his skill. He can shoot, he can defend, he can do a little bit of everything. He can rebound. So looking at his $11.1 million for next year, he can be the centerpiece of a deal. If you wanted to bring a young player, you could combine him with someone else to increase the money. If you want to go star hunting, it feels like Keegan is still that main, the main piece to really make a big substantial move that Monty McNair just wasn't willing to take. I don't think, and again, these are just this, none of this list is my, should the Kings trade Keegan? That's not what this is about. I don't think they should, especially given the state of their roster. Like, I'm keeping Keegan and building kind of around him or with him in the thought process. But if you want to go out and get a star, you'll probably have to include him.
So, look, the state of this roster and how last season went, I don't think you can say anybody on this roster is untouchable. I just don't like that. That's just not realistic. That being said, though, it's not so much I don't want the Kings to trade Keegan, because everybody knows how big of a Keegan Murray fan and believer I am. It's how in their right mind can the Kings trade Keegan when they have virtually nothing to support his absence, right? At whether it's his position, his play style, the defense that he provides. I mean, Keon Ellis is up there with him as the best defender on the team, but Keon is significantly more limited in positions that he can guard because of Keon's size versus the versatility of Keegan Murray, who's 6'8". And Keegan can basically guard 1 through 5, although he said he doesn't want to guard the 5 anymore. And I don't necessarily blame him. I don't know. Like, I understand including Keegan in a star swap. That's the only thing that makes logical sense. If you want to go out and get a star for one more desperate swing, which if Monty McNair were still here, I'd feel is a little more believable than Scott Perry being here, then that's a scenario where I'm like, okay, you can, you have to probably include Keegan Murray in that conversation. Any other conversation, I don't know how you trade Keegan Murray and get better unless you're getting multiple players at the same position, but volume isn't better than talent, and you're not going to get a better talent than Keegan, I don't think, in a deal, unless again you're star hunting. So the concept of trading Keegan makes a lot of sense. And it absolutely makes sense that he's number one on the list. I guessed it before I even read the article. I was like, yep, it's going to be Keegan number one, because he's a coveted position and coveted type of player around the league. But the Kings have historically not been able to find players at that position. So Scott Perry coming in here and immediately getting rid of that, I would say, is probably not the best first step forward.
No, and it'd be, if they're doing a total teardown, I get it. But it's pretty clear they're not doing that. Like, that's the only way it makes sense in my mind. I would almost rather trade Keegan just for assets rather than a star. And that's where you're just fully starting over, which I don't think we'll see.
So what about 2 and 3? Your top, rounding out the top 3 of the most tradable pieces that the Kings have.
Yeah, for me, number 2 is Malik Monk, who is the one I think would hurt the most. Well, maybe we'll see when we get to number 3. But Monk, similar to Keegan, great contract. Like, Monk's contract, 18.8 next year, 20.2 the year after that, and then a 21.6 player option for 2027, 28. To have him on a $18.8 million contract for the way that the CBA is set up is just a steal. Like, he's a starting caliber player making less than $20 million. Could come off the bench and he could do either role, but his ability to both score and facilitate, he's a leader in the locker room. Just, he brings all of the intangibles at that value, makes him, I think, the easiest contract to move for the Kings outside of Keegan, obviously, where I'm really interested to see the route that they go with him. And we can talk about it more a little bit later once we get further down the list. But to me, it's Monk, number 2. I think you could get a really strong caliber, either point guard or wing, if you wanted to move on from Monk. It would hurt, though. Like, he's the soul of Sacramento, it feels like.
Yeah, he's very much a fan favorite here, but that $18 million is really, like, again, you look down the list of salaries, and that $18 million, that is the contract that, if you are playing Tetris to piece a deal together, that feels like the glue. I mean, that just feels like the contract that maybe outside of DeMar DeRozan's, but Malik Monk's situation and circumstance. Now, DeMar DeRozan is a better player than Malik Monk, I think most would say, based off of just longevity and success and whatever. But Malik, you are not taking a flyer or a rental on 2 more years of a sunset career, right? Malik is someone that you will have under contract and in your system at a very, very high value or good value for the next 3 years. So there's value to that to consider in a trade as well. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where the heck did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and actually start building your wealth. You'll get surprise insights breaking down specifically where your money is going, how much money you're spending at specific places, whether it's like through an entertainment service or like a local coffee shop or at the grocery store or a food place, wherever. It'll break it all down for you. The all-in-one convenience is second to none, right? Instead of juggling multiple apps and spreadsheets and things like that, it's one place to get all your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Plus, collaboration is easy. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever, whether you're tracking shared and personal accounts, setting goals, and ultimately staying on the same page without any of the extra financial stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Let's move on to the third one, because there's a reason why I asked you about 2 and 3 together and to round out this top 3. So who's number 3?
Yeah, to me, it's Keon Ellis, which is, again, I think would hurt maybe more than Monk, but another fan favorite. But the big part about Keon is his contract situation, which is a little complicated. But he's at $2.3 million next year on a team option. So the Kings, and you may have gone over this already in previous podcasts, so I apologize if I'm re-explaining. They can decline his option and he becomes a restricted free agent, or they can pick up his option and he becomes an unrestricted free agent next year.
Mhm.
They can give him an extension, but I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it can be above a certain value based on his current contract.
Correct. I don't know what
So,
the dollar number is,
yeah,
but yeah, they can't just go, here's 20 million a year,
right.
stay here, basically.
So a little complicated, but if you opt in, then you're looking at a defensive star, like a player who has all defensive team potential on a $2.3 million contract, which even more so than Monk, because it's less money, is something that every single team in the league would probably jump on.
Mhm.
So to me, Keon, not alone, because you're not going to go out and trade him for another $2 million player. You're attaching him as the cherry on top of a deal, like him and Valanciunas or him and DeRozan. And you're bringing in someone who at another position, ideally, would round out the entire roster. That's your like break glass in case of emergency type trade. I'm not doing it. I think Keon fits what Doug wants to do to a T,
Mhm.
but the option is there if they want to go that route.
This is where I'm at with Keon. His contract is a double-edged sword
Yep.
because the value that you're getting for $2 million a year, which you and I will take $2 million. That sounds like a lot of money to us.
Right?
$2
Yeah.
million in the NBA is pennies. And the
Mhm.
value that you're getting for Keon Ellis at $2 million a year is incredible. But at the same time, in a trade scenario, it's not easy to move $2 million for anything of value, right?
Mhm.
Like a $2 million player is an end of the bench guy or a guy on a vet minimum contract. Like you're not getting, so like you say, it has to be the cherry on top. And the concern that I have with adding a player as good as Keon Ellis as the cherry on top of a trade is because you still need to add him to significant enough salary to get value back. So you
Mhm.
almost have to give away some of the value
Yep.
of Keon Ellis in a deal like that. Like you said, attaching him to Valanciunas, attaching him to DeMar DeRozan to sweeten the deal. Keon Ellis is too good of a player to just use to sweeten the deal, right? So
Mhm.
that's the kind of financial position that you that puts you in. Very similar argument that I have with Keegan Murray. Like, how do you trade Keon Ellis at this point in a way that makes any kind of sense unless you just feel like you're not going to be able to retain him? Which, if it were me,
Mhm.
I'm taking the risk. Or like as of right now, I'm declining his option and I'm
Yep.
letting him become a restricted free agent, so I at least maintain control. But I think letting Keon Ellis become an unrestricted free agent would be a disaster. Even if you
Yeah.
get him for one more year at $2 million, I think he's then just bouncing because I don't think this
Mhm.
year is going to be very good. And I think there are a lot of teams that will throw money at him knowing how valuable he is. Like, I think the Boston Celtics would salivate at the idea of adding
Oh,
Keon
yeah.
Ellis to their roster right now, right? So a
Man.
lot of winning teams
And
would
Derek
love to
White
have Keon
together?
Ellis. Yeah, and have him coming off the bench or a fringe start,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, a lot of teams would love Keon Ellis. So I say all that to say this, Will. You have your top three there of three players that none of Kings fans want to get rid of, right?
Mhm.
You also have, and we can get to where Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine fall on your list. We can get to that here in just a second. Those are two players that even if Kings fans would like to see one of them move, their contracts mean they're very likely not being moved.
Yep.
So to avoid essentially just running it back, do you have to trade one of those top three most tradable asset guys? And in this case, more than likely, it would suck. It would sting,
Mhm.
but it would be Malik Monk.
Yep. That's where I keep coming back to, like, looking at every possibility of kind of fixing this roster. It keeps coming back to Monk for me. And it's unfortunate because, like, Monk's skill set, like, you love it. You love everything he does. And but it's the trio. They have so many shooting guards.
Mm-hmm.
It's the trio of Levine, Monk, and Ellis are all playing the same position, and I think make a combined like $75 million. Like, it's just not feasible to go into next year with all three of them. You're probably not trading Levine, and if you are, it's for, I don't know. I threw out an idea of like Dame Lillard for Levine. It's like something drastic like that. Like, trading Levine is going to be very difficult. It'll be easier next year. So I think you run it back with Levine one more time. And when he becomes an expiring contract, his value goes up exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we want to trade Keon. Already talked about that. So everything falls back to Monk being the best option to reshape everything.
DeMar DeRozan, two-part question. One, where does he fall on the list? And two, like I would be stunned, Will, if DeMar is still a King. I think it's very clear both sides want to move on, right? The Kings and that 20-something million dollars, that's something that they can use. It's 24 million. That's money that they can use to at least either free up a little bit, or there's some wiggle room there, right? It's you're talking about that only contract that's basically between the teens and 30 or 40 million dollars. So where does he fall on the list? And then realistically though, like the reason we bring up or like I talk about the Kings might have to move one of those top three guys. Well, Matt, why not just move DeMar DeRozan? Wouldn't that be enough? I don't think so, because I don't think you're not getting a better player in a DeMar DeRozan deal. Maybe you're getting depth, but you're not. I don't think you're getting a better player. It just doesn't. It isn't feasible. It just doesn't make sense unless you're willing to throw a Keon Ellis on top of that. Like I said, sweeten the pot, which I don't think Keon Ellis is too good of a player to just sweeten the pot with in a DeMar DeRozan trade. So where does DeMar fall on the list for you? And what kind of value do you think the Kings can hope to get for him?
Yeah, I have him at number 5.
Okay.
And I think a lot of Kings fans will probably be a little disappointed in what they can get back for him. You put out, I thought, a great idea a few weeks ago of all the possible DeMar DeRozan trades, and I thought they were all extremely realistic. But when you first look at them, it's like, this guy's a 6-time All-Star, who averaged over 20 points for 12 years or whatever. But he's such a unique, his play style is so unique and has such an impact on the whole offensive scheme of a team. We saw that with the Kings. They skyrocketed and became the league leader in mid-range field goals, and it wasn't even close. And you need him. You bring him in for a very specific reason, and that lowers his trade value. Like, you're not bringing in DeRozan to a team that wants to shoot a bunch of threes, run fast, and play fast. Like, it's hard to find a team that wants a player like him. So that brings him down the list. What pulls him back up is his contract. Pretty easy to move. Player or $10 million guaranteed for next year, which isn't ideal. You still have that $10 million on the books, which is hard, but you're not looking at a $30, $40, $50 million contract. So I like the idea of, like, Norman Powell's probably the top end that you could get back for him. I would do that if I were the Kings, but you're not getting back another all-star level player probably.
Yeah, the thing with DeMar, I consider him a mercenary, right? You know exactly what he is. And DeMar wants to go to a place where he can try and win one last time. And the teams that want to add a mercenary scorer like DeMar are probably teams that are in the hunt to win, right? You look at some of the teams that struggled in the playoffs to get buckets at times. Like, I don't think he fits at all with the Houston Rockets. That's why I didn't do a Houston Rockets trade. But the Rockets struggled to score, right? The Orlando Magic struggled to score. So, and then of course, both LA teams, LA is home for DeMar. So I think he'd be happy to go back there, right? These are the type of teams that I'm thinking, like, a team that is trying to acquire DeMar DeRozan is trying to add a mercenary that can help them get buckets in tight moments and step up and not be their leading scorer, but step up and help them score when it comes to actual playoff time, right? There's no reason for the bottom half of the league to even consider having DeMar DeRozan on their team. Same kind of with the Sacramento Kings, who are probably going to be in that bottom half of the league conversation again. So DeMar's mercenary status makes him easy to understand, but harder to move because the list of suitors gets significantly smaller. And again, regardless of how good the contract is, a lot of teams again, you're trying to trade him to a team that's trying to take another step forward or add him to what they are doing. They're not looking to swap him for something good that they have to make it to make themselves worse, or like, it's just, you have to trade something to get something, but you're not going to get their best piece. That's why anybody who thinks that you're going to get a player at the level or even slightly better than DeMar DeRozan, even at 36, 37 years old, it's just not realistic. That's not the position that the Kings are in. And I think the Kings are half of trading DeMar DeRozan is just moving on and getting that money freed up and hopefully getting depth in return. Like that's what you're hoping for.
And even if you do move on from DeRozan and you bring in, say, trade DeRozan for another wing, great. You still need a starting point guard.
Right.
Like, I don't think Monk is a point guard, and I don't think Monk thinks he's a point guard. So you have to, moving DeRozan is great, but there will still be another substantial follow-up move that's needed, or you take a risk and go in free agency. But like we said, that's going to be tough. Point guards, especially, the point guard free agent market is pretty bleak, as is the wings. And like everyone's going to be competing for wings. And the Kings haven't been able to attract any. So trading DeRozan, great, but it doesn't fix. It fixes some things, but it doesn't fix everything. It goes back to what we started with. The Kings are in a really, really tough spot.
A name that I'm really intrigued to ask you about to wrap this up, Will, because I think this is going to be actually something to really monitor and pursue this offseason. It's Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah.
Because the Sacramento Kings have the benefit of having two starting caliber. Well, we know Domantas Sabonis is a starter, and Sabonis with his money, right? Even if he's not happy, even if he gets he gets clarity on the state of the organization, he doesn't like it. Sorry, dude, you're getting paid a bunch of money. Like you're probably stuck here. Deal with it. Valanciunas is a very valuable starting caliber center, and you have two other teams in the Pacific Division, Will, that are desperate for centers in the Lakers and the Warriors. Now, I'm not necessarily saying trade Valanciunas to those two teams and help them out, but there are teams out there that are always looking for center depth, and the Kings have two starting caliber centers on their roster. I think Jonas Valanciunas is going to, I think Scott Perry is going to be fielding a ton of phone calls about Jonas Valanciunas. So where did he fall on your list? And in your mind, like what kind of value do you think you could get for a guy who's your backup center here, but who's probably a starting center in most every other city?
Yeah, I put him at number 8. So out of 10, I was so close to putting him. Spoiler, Levine, I put at 7, just because his contract. I was so close to flipping the two of them. Like, because Valanciunas, $10 million next year. I think the year after that too, or something like that. Maybe it's 12. But great money. You know exactly what you're going to get. So he should be pretty easy to move. Kings got him as a reminder for City Sissoko and 2 second-round picks.
Right.
Like, it feels like that's about what the Kings would get for him. And if they don't want the second-round picks, insert name of role player X. Like, they could use Valanciunas to go get a maybe backup point guard or a fringe level starting point guard or just wing depth. But that $10 million with the way the Kings roster is currently constructed, that's a lot of money for a backup center. And it's, to me, I would almost rather have a just hyper athletic young big just come in, take a chance, maybe 2 of them. And Isaac Jones, give him more runtime and some more minutes. But it's a backup center is a pretty comparatively easier position to fill at the end of an offseason than point guard or wing. So I think Valanciunas is another name I'll be keeping an eye on. And if I were to redo this list now, I might bump him up to 7 and put Levine down.
I wonder if he is just something that the Kings don't have leverage on a lot of situations.
Yeah.
They just don't. I wonder if he's someone that they can exploit. And I don't mean exploiting Valanciunas. I mean exploiting teams who need Valanciunas, right? When you have an abundance of talent at a position, and it's the complete opposite for point guards, right? Every team knows that the Kings need a point guard. So any point guard the Kings try to acquire, every team in the league is going to try and take advantage of that. Like, you need this guy, so we're going to get more value. Like, if the Warriors come calling, because they desperately need a center, if the Warriors come calling for Jonas Valanciunas, I don't care that it took City Sissoko and 2 second-round picks. The price has gone up because you're the Golden State Warriors and you desperately need it. Lakers, you're the Lakers. You desperately need this, and maybe they walk away. But that's the aspect that I'm most curious about, because I feel like, granted, Perry didn't make these moves, but you got Valanciunas for a steal, given the type of talent that he is. And regardless of what you want to do or how stuck you are with Domantas Sabonis, I do agree $10 million is a lot of money for a backup center. But I think Valanciunas is one of those guys that you can have the most confidence in with non-Sabonis minutes, or if Sabonis ever gets hurt, knock on wood, like you have that there for you, especially if you're still trying to be competitive. So I'm very intrigued in the Valanciunas trade sweepstakes, because I'm interested to see how Perry can use leverage better than his predecessors, because that was something that I don't think McNair, especially not Vlade, did very well.
Yeah. And hopefully, God, he can't be worse, right? Let's cross our fingers.
God,
I know.
Not.
Man, and the nice thing about Valanciunas too is, like, you can always revisit these at the deadline. Like, who knows where the Kings will be at. There are some players, I think, here on the list where that's not the case. But Valanciunas, I think big bodies are always in demand. Do you think that would, and maybe it doesn't matter, but do you think that would frustrate Sabonis, moving Valanciunas? Good friend, fellow Lithuanian teammate. Like, do you not care at this point? I don't know if Sabonis has done enough to have that kind of say in the moves. But
so one of the things that I've been told is that since Valanciunas has come to Sacramento, like, he and Sabonis have been spending a lot of time together, which makes complete sense, right? And like, people need to understand, Valanciunas was Sabonis's vet in a lot of ways. Not that Valanciunas was there in Indiana, but through the Lithuanian international team, like, Valanciunas in many ways took Sabonis under his wing. So these two have a very, very close relationship. Will, I'm going to put it as bluntly as possible. I don't care. I don't care. Like, so, and I have been the biggest Sabonis supporter in this city. And I watched him perform the way that he performed in that play-in game. Pathetic. After I defended him to the end of the earth for the playoff series that he had against the Warriors, which, again, I don't think was that bad. It wasn't as good as the Kings needed it to be, but it was not as bad as people make it out to be. It just, we hyper-focus on Kevon Looney outplaying him and how much that was a bummer for the Sacramento Kings. But Sabonis did nothing to help himself in that awful play-in performance, especially against Anthony Davis. And whether or not we don't know all the specific details, but we feel pretty confident Sabonis was one of those players that wasn't exactly Team Mike Brown. So the organization chose you. They put your developmental coach and Doug Christie as the head coach of this team, right? Like, they've laid out the red carpet for you, and they gave you a contract that, as of now, nobody else in the league would want to give you, right? I don't care what you want. Like, get in line. We all want clarity on where the organization is going, but buddy, you are set in stone here. So if trading Valanciunas makes the Sacramento Kings better, I don't care how Sabonis feels about it. That's just where I'm at personally.
Which is great, and I think much easier for a new GM to say than for McNair 100%. To come back.
100%. You're dead right about that. Well, I'll sneak one more in. We both expect DeMar DeRozan to be gone. Training camp begins. Is Malik Monk on this roster?
I'm going to go with no. It's just gut feeling. And from what we've heard of Perry wanting to compete, no. And it hurts me. It really does. Like, I love Monk. But from a lot of different aspects, it just makes sense to move on from him. Unfortunately, none of those aspects are talent, but he was put in a very difficult position of what money left him, and that's the easiest way to dig yourself out of it. I hope I'm wrong, though, and that they do some other combination of Tetris moves, and that we get to see Monk continue, but time will tell.
Will, keep up the phenomenal work all off season long. You help us get through these long months. It's like, sometimes it's hard to, like, realize it's going to be like 6 months until the Sacramento
I
Kings
know.
play a legitimate basketball game again. So buckle up, bud. We're in for the long haul, but you can get through the off season with Will Z's great articles and his great content. Check all that out for Sports Illustrated. Will, this will not be the last time this off season we have you on the show. Appreciate you, my man. Keep up the great work, and we'll do it again soon. All right.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me on.